welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about a creator that I've heard of quite a while ago but never quite looked into because I knew I'd probably be quite triggered by her content. But I heard about a new situation regarding this woman, and when I decided to look into it a little, I fell down the rabbit hole and decided that this was an important enough topic for me especially to make a video about and discuss my perspective just because of the situations we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to issue a little bit of a trigger warning for anybody who's sensitive to this type of thing. I am going to be talking about estrangement from your parents and also going low or no contact with your parents, usually due to narcissistic traits. That's specifically my experience. So that's what I'll be talking about today, and if that's something that would affect you to hear too much about, we're also going to be watching videos of someone from the other side of it, the parent who was cut off. So if that's something that would bother you, please skip this video and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. For those who are able to stick around, thank you so much. Today we are going to be talking about Dawn, who is better known as the fired mom on TikTok. She is a mother of 3 boys who are all adults now, and they are all no contact with her and have been for about 2 years now. She started creating TikToks about 1 year ago from the perspective of someone who's been cut off by all their kids, and her content is quite toxic. While researching this video, I actually discovered that this week she deleted a ton of her videos, including some of her most viral videos with the most views on them. And she claimed at first that it was an accident, that she didn't mean to. She was trying to turn off the stitches and accidentally deleted the video. And then right after, she goes into this little rant about hackers, how she almost lost her account to hackers or something. So I don't really know. People online showed that it's really hard to accidentally, it's like they're 2 different menus. If you were going in to turn off stitches, it's a completely different menu than if you were going to delete a video. So it'd be really hard for her to have deleted it on accident. So people think that's probably a lie, and that most likely she just wanted to get rid of some of the more controversial videos she had posted, including that one that went viral the most, because all of the videos of hers that have gone viral are the ones where she gives the worst takes and the worst advice to other people in the situation that she was in the past. Fortunately, I was able to find a handful of videos from her TikTok that she hadn't deleted that we can go over so that we can discuss why her content is so harmful. But before we get into it, if you like commentary videos about the latest and lamest things here on the internet, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post 1 to 2 videos a month, and I also stream as many days a week as I can playing video games. So if you are interested in any of that, please support my channel and I would really appreciate it. Before we get started on watching Dawn's videos, I do want to talk a little bit about my own experience before we get into it so that you understand why I have the opinions that I do about this situation. I am the victim of abuse, both physical, mental, and financial abuse at the hands of my mother. My mother is a narcissist and she is a drug addict. And I have been no contact with her since December 1st of 2023. I was very, very low contact before that day for several years when I was finally able to move out of her house. And it took a long time for me to find the courage to actually cut her off for good. I will go into a little more detail about specific situations a little bit later in this video, but I just wanted to make sure that people know right up front that I have a different perspective on this, basically the opposite perspective that Dawn has. Dawn is the estranged parent, and I am the child who estranged myself from my mother. So I think that it's important to have this conversation and talk about the things that Dawn is posting and why it's so harmful to anyone looking for advice in that situation. I am going to be skipping around a little bit because of the fact that her older videos, she didn't give many details about why her kids were no contact with her. She kept it very, very vague, and I think that was on purpose. I think that she thought people would sympathize with her more if she didn't give the reasons as to why, because I'm sure most people, if they hear the real reasons that we're about to go over, they would agree that the kids should have cut her off, right? But if you don't give those reasons, then people will sympathize with you more. So I think that that's why she did it. So first we're going to go over what happened, why the kids are no contact, and then we're going to go over some other situations or other things that she stated on her videos that have added to the fact that nobody really likes this creator because of how she talks about these things.
So why are my children no contact? My children are no contact because of a multitude of factors. Me being the primary character, I'm the one that they're no contact with. My life was one filled with trauma. And
so right off the bat, it's already red flags, right? The first thing that she's talking about is that people have asked her, what made your kids go no contact? Like, what happened? And when going to start answering that question, the first thing that she says is not, I did something wrong that upset my kids and then they cut me off for it. Her response is, I've had a lot of trauma in my life. So have a lot of us. And we don't do that. We don't do what you did. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but just because you've had trauma in your life does not mean it excuses the fact that you mistreated people in your life. It's right off the bat, she cares more about herself and what's going on with her than anything that's going on with her kids or their experience being her sons.
And when I had met their father, I was in a fast forward mode trying to achieve everything that I needed to achieve before I reached the age of 29, because I didn't think I would even live to be 29. That's what happens when you live a life of trauma. And even though there were red flags to his narcissistic tendencies, I did not have the strength or the self-esteem to be able to stand up to those red flags and end things, even though I did try to end things when we were engaged. So we got married and we had our first child. I actually left him before I found out I was pregnant with my first son. But once I found out I was pregnant, I was like, this is it. This is my life. I need to make it work. And so I did everything I could to make it work. And it wasn't until my youngest was not quite 2. And there were many times between that first time I left, or the second time I tried to end things, and the time my son was almost 2, that I had tried to end things, but something happened that I was like, no more. And it takes 7 to 8 times for someone who was abused to leave their abuser, and it was the 8th and final time. I did not realize that when you leave or when you discard a narc, that they will do everything in their power to make your life hell, and that was exactly what he did. And he did everything in his power to alienate my sons against me, but that's just part of the story.
She then starts going into a little background about her first marriage with the father of her 3 kids and calling him a narcissist and saying that he was an abuser, saying that it took her 8 times to leave. And I tried to research more into her ex-husband. I don't know his name, and there wasn't much information online about her husband, you know what I mean, even referencing it as the fired mom's husband or ex-husband. So I really couldn't find any information on this, and she could be telling the truth that this guy is a narcissist and an abuser, and that that he caused a lot of trauma for her, and that's why she was struggling and mistreated her kids. It's still not an excuse, but she doesn't seem to realize, though, that I think by her calling her husband a narcissist, she thinks that means that there's no possible way that she could also be a narcissist. Like, I don't think she realizes 2 narcissists can get married. It's usually not 2 of the same type of narcissist, though. So if her husband is indeed a narcissist, he's probably the overt narcissist, the one that is more apparent, right? And then she would be the covert narcissist, who is more on the down low, more so on the passive aggressive side, and but it can still be just as mean and terrible to the people around them. The reason I even question whether she's telling the truth about her husband or not is because there's multiple instances of her doing this double speak where she makes a statement and then she makes another statement that completely invalidates the first statement but never addresses the fact that both of the statements she said can't be true and acts like they are both true at the same time. It's really confusing and hard to even go through these things when someone speaks like that. It's tough because they literally don't realize that they are not making any sense, but luckily I've had experience with that one, so I'm able to read through the lines a little bit more. But I didn't want anyone to think I was being insensitive by not thinking that she really did go through what she says she did. She may have. This guy could be a narcissist, but even if he is, she cannot blame her adult sons going no contact when they were all grown on the fact that her husband is a narcissist when she's the reason why they left, not him.
The other part of the story is, my being raised in a narcissistic family cult by a silent generation cult leader with boomer uncles. My upbringing was very strict, and so I was indeed very strict with my sons. I did choose my battles. I loved them very much. I don't think they doubted how much I loved them. But I did not have a typical family unit to model, to understand how to be a loving parent. That's for sure.
So she says she was raised in a cult, and she goes into no detail whatsoever, so I don't know what to even think about that. I guess we'll just sail right past that one. And she says that she did not have a normal family to model her own parenting style after, so she was very strict. And I just wanted to say, people who have horrible upbringings, they often go on to learn from their own parents' mistakes, and they become good parents to their kids by studying and learning and preparing for having a child instead of just having kids one day when you're not ready for them, like a lot of people do, right? Especially parents that end up not wanting their kids and mistreating them. They were not ready to be parents, and that's why they treat them so badly. So I just find it weird that she's trying to blame her own parenting style on the fact that she didn't have a normal upbringing, because that information of how to be a good parent was always available to her. She just never sought it out, and there's no excuse for that. You cannot just emulate what you've been through, especially when you know it was wrong, and then just say, well, I didn't know any better, because you could have. You absolutely could have learned how to be a good mom and take care of your kids the way that you're supposed to, but you didn't even bother because you are the center of everything to yourself. You are the main character, in your own opinion.
The teen years became very difficult. I had tried to get therapy for my oldest multiple times when things were, showing that he needed therapy, and he would not open up to therapy. And so I tried the tough love, because tough love is what the parenting style was at the time when kids were acting out. And so that was very tough on him. And
so she uses the phrase tough love and mentioned being strict on them. Anytime I hear the phrase tough love, my ears perk up, because almost every time I've heard that phrase, it is used to very subtly mention to other people that you hit your kids. Like, I've never not heard tough love to mean I hit my kids when they disrespect me or misbehave, and that I can't say that out loud, because most parents especially are not going to be okay with that these days. Most people will definitely not like you if you outwardly admit to hitting your children, but if you say, I'm a strict parent and I do tough love, a lot more people will not know what that means specifically, and they'll think, oh, they're just strict, like there's a lot of rules on the kids or something, or they have to do chores or whatever. They won't automatically think, oh, they hit their kid. But honestly, I've hardly ever heard the tough love used in a non-abusive situation.
It was difficult. I tried to work with their father, who would always say, I'll talk with them. And that's what he did. He talked with them. They saw him every other weekend, and that was about it. At this point, when they were teenagers, my body started to implode with one chronic illness diagnosis after the other, and my rare disease symptoms started, but my doctors were stumped. So it was very difficult for my kids, because when I wasn't working, I was sleeping, I was resting. And so a lot of things came down on their shoulders, to help around the house and stuff like that. Their teen years probably were not fun and were filled with worry, I'm sure.
Based on what she just said about the every other weekend visitation, she was the primary parent, and he only saw those kids about 4 days a month. And that's if you go off of a standard weekend. Like, you get them when they get out of school on Friday, you have them Friday night into Saturday, you have them Saturday night, and then you would bring them home sometimes Sunday afternoon. A lot of times it's earlier in the afternoon too, so like between 1 and 3 p.m. Usually it's before dinner, so that the kids are back to their primary household before dinner that night. They can settle in and relax before having to get ready to go back to school the next day. That's usually what a weekend is like when there's a custody agreement. So she claims that he alienated those kids from her from the time that they separated all the way up through until they were adults, and then even after they were adults, because she has a whole video about that alienation in adulthood, parental alienation in adulthood, that we're going to talk about a little later. But she really thinks he alienated them from her when she's the primary parent. She saw them so much more than he did. I'm not saying it's not possible to try and manipulate your kids in such a way with only 4 days a month, but I'm just saying it would be a lot harder to alienate them against somebody when they're living with that person so much more, unless they're actually doing these negative things that the father claimed that she did. And these kids claim to have been emotionally abused throughout their entire childhood. So the fact that she's trying to blame it all on him when she saw him way more is just kind of delusional.
So as they started to leave the nest, my oldest left very early. He left very early, and there was nothing I could do to keep him at home. When he wanted to come home, when he realized having heat and having hot water were important, of course, I let him come home.
Did you catch that little smirk and the small hint of joy in her tone that her son failed to move out and had to come back? She says that he left very early as a teen to try to move out and get away from her. And he had to move back in because he didn't have hot water or heat in the place that he was living. But the way she said it, oh, he realized that heat and hot water are important, so I let him move back in, like, it wasn't as dramatic as I just made it out to be, but the way that she said it, just like, yeah, I was gracious enough to let him move back after he failed to escape me, she seemed happy that he failed and had to come back. And this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about my situation and compare it to the situation that Dawn put her own kids in. For my situation specifically, it took me 4 tries to move out of my mom's house and stay out for good. I had to move back in 3 times due to my circumstances, and every single time it was a way for her to control me even more. Every time I moved out and then had to move back, there was new rules. She's like, oh, I'll be gracious enough to let you move back in with me, but you're going to do this for me, and I want you to do this around the house, and you're going to watch your brother a lot more, because my little brother is 11 years younger than me. And so there was always stipulations when I had to move back in with her about what I had to do to, like, earn my keep, even though I was actually paying rent also. So I was one of the youngest in my grade in high school, which meant that I graduated when I was 17. And the moment I graduated, even though I was going to be going to college in just a couple months, my mom forced me to get a job and told me if I didn't, that she would kick me out. She was going to make me homeless. That was one of her favorite things to threaten me with, was to kick me out and leave me on the streets. She knew I was scared of that. I had a lot of anxiety about that, so she used that against me. And so when I got the job, I did not even want to work where I ended up working. I wanted to apply to other places, but my mom made me get a job where she already worked because she wanted to keep an eye on me. So she worked as a shift lead at an Arby's, and I was hired to work as a cashier. That was my first job. And for some reason, she was horrible to me as a manager. That's a story for another day, but she was horrendous to me compared to everybody else. It was a nightmare. But she forced me to do that because she wanted me to start paying rent at 17. I was not even legally an adult yet, and she was making me pay rent. So at the time when it started, before I even got my first paycheck, I had been working for about a week and a half. I had not even gotten my first paycheck yet, and she was telling me, you're going to start paying $200 in rent a month. Now let me explain to you how little I made at that time. When I first started working, I think that minimum wage in New York was about $8. I was only making a little over $100 a week. So paying her $200 a month for me to live in the place where there was already all these other rules I had to do just to be able to stay there, that was a quarter of our rent. And that was half of my paycheck every week. I had no money. The money that I had left over from my other 2 checks every month was used for food and for other expenses. Like, I was about to go to college. I had to buy things for myself. And I didn't have a scholarship because I went to like a community college. I didn't earn any scholarships because my grades were just not quite good enough because of all the stuff I was going through at home. And so I had to just make it work. I was paying rent, I was working full time, and I was going to school full time, which I was going to school for a math and science degree. So the work I was doing was physics and calculus, college level work, stuff my mom didn't even understand. But I was trying to do that while having to focus on all these other things, all these adult responsibilities of hers. They were her adult responsibilities that she was pushing off onto me. And at the time, I didn't know it was because she wanted to use that money that I gave her for drugs. It never actually went to rent. And sometimes she didn't even pay rent with my money. It just went straight to drugs. And sometimes we would be about to lose our place that we have to live because she wasn't paying rent. And so just one thing after another, sabotage in my life. She really wanted to see me fail. So I busted my ass for the first year of college. I went through the first 2 semesters and I was so busy, but I made it work because I really wanted to get a good degree. I wanted to do something with my life. I wanted a high-paying career, and I was really good at math, so I was focused a lot on just trying to secure my future. But she didn't care about that. She didn't want me to have a future. She wanted my future to be staying at home with her and paying all her bills for her, right? So when she realized that I was managing having the job and the full-time job and going to school and, just dealing with all the stress at home from all the crap that she put me through, she realized she needed to do something else, that I was still thriving even though she had tried to make me fail. And so she started telling me that I was forced to babysit my brother, which I was already doing occasionally during that time. But she started forcing me, again, under the threat of homelessness, to watch him almost every single day of the week so that she could leave the house. And at the time, she didn't even have a job. She was still looking for a job because she had gotten fired. That was a year later. She had gotten fired from the job where I was still working at Arby's because she missed too many shifts or whatever. So she didn't even have a job, and she was leaving the house, and I didn't even know where she was going, honestly. But she forced me to watch my brother, who was 7 at the time. And so I had to choose between all of these things, like my future or doing the things that make it so that I still have a place to live, you know? I did not get to really have a choice there. I was dealing with too much at once, and I couldn't stop the job because she was forcing me to do that. I couldn't stop watching my brother because she was forcing me to do that. And it's not like I could just get my homework done while I was watching him. And that's not his fault. I don't blame him for this at all, but he has ADHD, and he was 7. They were still trying to figure out his medication, and he just had a buttload of energy. So I could not keep up with that kid, and I definitely could not do physics and calculus homework while I'm watching him. And so because I could not handle all of these responsibilities she forced on me, on top of worrying about my own future, the only thing that I could get rid of to lighten my load was to drop out of school. And I did not want to do that, but I had to, because I mentally and physically could not handle the amount of work that she was putting on me. And that was her goal all along, in my opinion, was to put so much on me that I had to drop out of school, because I was like halfway through my 3rd semester. I would have had one more semester. I would have had an associate's degree in math and science. And she did not want that, because she knew the moment that I had a degree, I could get a nicer job and I could afford to move out. She really did not want me to leave. So she did what she did, and she sabotaged my life. And that would not even be the first time that she sabotaged my life to force me to drop out of college. It actually happened a second time a few years later. But I'm not going to go into detail on that one. That one's a little bit more traumatic for me. But the first time, horrible. I just can't believe that someone would act like that. And I really tried, because I didn't know at that time that she was trying to sabotage me. That's only something I know now looking back on it. But at the time, I thought she really just needed me to watch him because my stepdad was not in the picture at that time. For like a couple of years, he wasn't around. So it was just me, her, and my brother. And so I thought that she didn't have a choice. But she wasn't doing anything important. She was going out to do drugs. So she literally ruined my life for that. And so when I tried to bring it up to her multiple times before I dropped out of school, like, hey, I cannot get my own responsibilities done for school because of me having to watch him for free, even because she was like, you have to watch him or you're homeless, when I was already paying to live there. It's just so crazy that she was able to do this stuff to me. But I was scared of her, and I felt like I had no help. If I was kicked out, I would have nowhere to go. And at that time, I had not met my boyfriend yet. He's the only reason I was even able to get a house outside of my mom, because of the financial abuse. So when I tried to tell her that I was having a hard time with doing all these things that she was forcing me to do for watching him for free, do you want to know what she said to me every single time I tried to point out to her that I just needed her to not make me do that so I could focus on school? Every single time that I said that, she called me an ungrateful brat and said that I was selfish, and that if I didn't watch him, she would throw all of my stuff out into the lawn, and that I would be homeless. She would never let me come back again. Even though I was paying the rent. I still don't understand how she thought that was okay. And at the time, I didn't know that that's illegal. I did not know that she would have to evict me. I didn't know that until years later. So I didn't know. I thought she literally legally could just throw all my things outside and kick me out, even though that legally she would not have been able to do that. I believed her. She threatened me with it. I believed her. You know what I mean? So that was her whole goal from the start. She wanted me to have to stay home with her and be her emotional plaything for the rest of all time, you know? She wanted me to be her emotional punching bag when she was angry and rageful, and then a caring, kind, and compassionate listener who took care of her and showed her affection when she wanted it. Nothing I felt or wanted mattered even a little bit to her in that situation. It was all about her, and So that's why I feel so strongly about this stuff with Dawn, because I know what it's like when your parent does not want to see you thrive and takes joy in you failing to get away from them. And the way that Dawn said that about her son, about her being so gracious to let him move back in when he failed to escape her, she's so happy about it. It really irked me that she was so happy that he failed to have a stable life outside of being in his mom's home.
I was very grateful to my son's girlfriend because she really made a change in his life and he started making some really good decisions. And I was happy to celebrate in that and to see my son as I knew he could be. But they took that as me being obsessed with him. I was just happy to see him being such a great guy.
This is something that's going to come up again later when we talk about a video about her therapist, but I wanted to mention here that I thought it was strange that Dawn held on to the fact that her daughter-in-law called her a good mom when they first met, but she only called her a good mom because she said that she enjoyed how nice her boyfriend, Dawn's son, is towards her, that he's nice and respectful and he treats her well. And so she was basically saying, you're a good mom because you raised this boy. But she didn't know Dawn yet and would later come to know Dawn and completely cut contact with her because of her behavior. So even though this person absolutely does not feel that way anymore, Dawn has to hold on to these little fragments of people giving her positive feedback about her being a good mom because she knows that she was so terrible to her kids. It's all she has. She doesn't have her kids anymore. All she has is people in the past saying she's a good mom when it's literally people that won't even be around her anymore.
I suffered a brain injury. I had no one that I was living with, and the brain injury was a very severe concussion that I was knocked out for over 45 minutes, and it was a second concussion within a year. A second concussion within a year can kill you, and it almost killed me. Healing from that concussion took a very long time, and it took a lot of medical intervention, and it caused me to have a lot of behaviors that were very difficult for my oldest and his wife while they were expecting my granddaughter. It was difficult for them to process, and again, living alone, there was nobody to intercede. So when I went into a mania and a psychosis that made things even worse, I do believe that it went right down the pathway of their father, telling them that, your mother's crazy anyway. Because when I would set boundaries when they were teenagers, they would say, Mom, you're crazy, you're just crazy. And the way they said it, I knew it came from someplace else.
She kind of goes in and out of order when she tells stories of like things from the past and things from now, and then talking about the estrangement and then talking about the past again. Like, it's kind of confusing, so I understand this might not be in like the fully like chronological order or anything, but she starts talking again about setting boundaries when the kids were teens, and then the dad and the son's calling her crazy for doing that. And she's saying that she knew the teens had heard that phrase, calling her crazy, from somewhere else and repeated it. Most likely she's saying it's from the dad, right? And that and then that's completely invalidating of the fact that her teens were thinking, feeling people who can have their own opinions. When you're a teenager, you absolutely can feel a certain way about your parent. And at that point in time, they would have been through a lot of things. So she completely invalidates that they're people because they were her kids, right? It's so crazy to see moms do that. They really forget that their kids can have their own opinions. They're like, oh, my kids don't like me. It must be that their dad said something bad about me. It's not about my behavior at all. She admitted earlier in the video to being a strict parent. She most likely was just like a helicopter mom who was hovering over her kids like crazy. But even if during the time of her injury her behavior was bad, there was already a divide between her and her sons before that happened. Meaning that if she was already, being kind of nasty to them when she had the injury, she would have become even worse. And therefore, most people would not want to be a part of that situation. Even if you like your parent, that would be a tough situation. But especially if you don't really like being around them that much, you wouldn't want to put yourself through that just to try to care for them if they're already not nice to you before the injury. So now that we finished the first part where she only talked about herself and her trauma, we can actually get into the second part where she finally talks about what actually happened between her and her sons. So it actually started with the oldest son.
The first situation of no contact happened quite shockingly to me after I held my granddaughter the first time when she was a few months old. You have to remember this is during COVID, like before any vaccines were available, and doctors were very cautious with newborns. And my son and daughter-in-law are great parents, and they followed the doctor's orders. So it was a porch visit, and my daughter-in-law was very forlorn looking the whole entire time. And I said something trying to lighten the mood. And I said something trying to lighten the mood. I said, because many pictures that my ex's wife had posted had comments saying, my gosh, she looks just like her father. And so I said, without thinking, now this is not an excuse, this is a reality. I was on lots of psychiatric meds from my mania, from my psychosis, that were keeping my brain down. Like, it slows your brain down from thinking, it slows it from processing really fast. I was on a boatload of meds. I said, and I said it in a joking way, I said, does it piss you off that everyone says that she looks just like her dad? My son's response to me saying that on the porch was, oh, she's too pretty to look like me. And my daughter-in-law didn't really respond, but the minute I said it, I also said, wow, that didn't sound right. I'm so sorry. I should not have even said that. That was my response the minute I said it. And I took a family picture of them before they went back inside and before I left. Then when I got in the car, I sent another apology to my son through Messenger.
So Dawn makes this joke knowing that her daughter-in-law would be sensitive to that type of comment. If you know it pisses her off or it would upset her, why would you even say it? And she blames it on the fact that she was on medications, but your reaction after was not great either, because, I mean, she says she apologized right after she said it, but you can't take back something you've already said, right? And then later, when she leaves, she sends a text out to apologize, but not to the daughter-in-law. She sends the apology to her son and asks the son to pass it along to the daughter-in-law. Like, you can't even text and talk to the person that you offended. You have to talk to their husband. Why would you not go to the person that you upset to tell them you're sorry? Because if you go to your son, it kind of seems like you don't really care, and you're just saying it to not damage your relationship with your son at all. She also mentions that she found out later on why the daughter-in-law was a little upset, and it was because she never apologized to the daughter-in-law for how she treated her when she was manic and having problems with psychosis after her injury. So this is a trend where she apologizes to the son but doesn't apologize to the daughter-in-law. When she apologized for being manic, she only apologized to her son. Why does she not care that the person she's supposed to be apologizing to doesn't actually receive an apology and only hears from her husband that she apologized to him for her? That makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense for her to do that. It's hurtful. We're going to go on a tangent for a second to talk about a different video. There's a quick clip of this that relates to what we're talking about right now.
He said to me that we are going to be taking a break from you. He said that I always make jabs at his wife, which I didn't realize that I did. Nothing was intentional, but that was what he said. And I did not see my granddaughter again for 5 more months. My daughter-in-law has since stated publicly that they were just going to take a break for a couple of weeks, but I said that he was, or that she was too sensitive. She says that I said in the message that he needed anger management. I don't recall saying that. I was, however, still deep on very strong antipsychotics, deep in the recovery from my psychosis, and still recovering from my concussion. So I may have said those things. I do remember saying something to the fact of, having only sons, I don't understand the sensitivities that females have. I simply don't. And she said it was at that point that they went no contact, but I never received a message from him re-clarifying we are no contact.
It's another video where she's recalling the very first time, what she said to the daughter-in-law and why they went no contact that first time. And there's a little bit of extra detail about the conversation her and her son had after she said what she said to the daughter-in-law that day. And he said that he was upset with her because she is always making jabs at his wife, and that they don't appreciate how nasty Dawn is when she speaks to and about the daughter-in-law. And her immediate reaction to saying that in this video is she claims she didn't know that she did that, which is a classic narcissistic trait, that you don't remember the bad things that you do, right? You don't remember, or I remember it differently, you know? And she said it wasn't her intention, but if it was because she was on psych medication. And that's another one of those classic narc traits right there. It's one after the other in this video. I've heard this one from my mom a million times. Well, I didn't do that, but if I did it for a good reason. So people who didn't do the thing they're saying they didn't do don't have to make that statement about the reason, you know. If they didn't do it, they just say they didn't do it. Someone who did do that thing and then is trying to deny it is going to say, I didn't do it, but if I did, and make that qualifying statement that they had a good reason, so that they are still claiming they didn't do it, but then if you find out later that there's proof that they did do it, they can say, well, I did it because I had a good reason. And it's just like adding layers to fall back on so that no matter what, they're right. And it's so frustrating to hear people do that. You don't make a qualifying statement if you didn't do that. You just say you didn't do it, and you don't feel like you have to make people believe that you didn't do it. You just say you didn't do it, and you continue the conversation. I don't think she realizes she's doing these things, but it was literally one after the other. Classic narcissistic, emotionally abusive, covert traits that she is expressing here in her relationship with her children. Also in this video, Dawn talks about the fact that the daughter-in-law claims that Dawn told her son that he needs anger management when they were talking about the situation. But Dawn claims that she does not recall saying that to him. And both in this situation and when she's talking about when he mentioned that she makes jabs at the wife, both times she didn't deny it. She just said that she doesn't remember it or that it didn't happen. And that is something that they do all the time because they have two halves, right? There's half of them that thinks they're a good person and is constantly saying, I'm a good person, I'm a good mom, constantly validating, self-validation. And then there's the other half that's actually who they are as a person, how they really act, how they're nasty and spiteful towards people they know and just don't talk to them with respect. And if you don't lie and just say, I don't remember that, these two halves would be clashing and you'd have an identity crisis because you believe two things that don't actually go together. If you believe both of them, it makes no sense. They contradict each other, right? But that is how narcissists have to react to these things, because if they remember them, then they were just awful that whole time and pretending they weren't, right? And they don't ever want to admit even slightly that they were somehow in the wrong. And so they just say, I don't remember that.
So as a result of that comment, that was when my first no contact happened with my son and daughter-in-law, and I lost all access for the next 5 months. And I was devastated, and I did everything wrong. I sent gifts, I sent cards, I sent emails, I sent cards to my daughter-in-law. I still at this point was not looking at anything to do with no contact online. I had no idea about anything, none of this. I had no clue. I had no clue about any behaviors that adult children would do if they thought that their parent was a narc. I had no idea.
So because of what Dawn said to the daughter-in-law, they both cut her off for 5 months, and she did not get to see the grandchild at all in that time. Dawn reacted very badly to this. She was sending them gifts, she was sending cards to her daughter-in-law and to her son, and basically just love bombing them to try to get her son back in her life and so that she could see her grandchild. But that'll never work in this type of situation. If someone is so done with the way that you act towards them and they cut you off because of it, bombarding them with love and gifts and affection is not going to help. Because I don't know about for her sons, but for me, it feels like any gift I ever got from my mom came with a price tag. Not for her, but for me. Like if you accept the gift, then you now owe them something, right? Whether it's trying to have a relationship with that person again, or like in my case, anytime my mom gave me a gift, it was something she could keep in her back pocket. And the next time she wanted me to do something and I didn't want to, she'd be like, well, I got you this, and pull it out of her pocket. Like, I got you this, and I did this for you, and I did this for you, and therefore you're a bad daughter if you don't do what I am telling you to do. And it was never anything good, right? It was her just like emotionally abusing me and convincing me of things that were not true, right? And that's when she would use that. It was just a way to control me and to hold things over my head, even when it wasn't supposed to be, like a birthday gift or a Christmas gift. She would definitely use those things to gain control in any situation that she could.
Fortunately, 5 months in, my son did reach out and said that they would like to meet with me and sit down and discuss some things, and so I agreed, and they offered meeting with me at a public park, and I thought that they were doing that so that I wouldn't be able to see my granddaughter, that they would leave her with a babysitter at their home, and I was very surprised to find that they had my granddaughter with them. But I realized once I started investigating in the no contact world that they do that so that the the just no mother-in-law or the narcissistic parent won't throw a fit or make a scene. I've never made a scene with either of them. There was one scene I made with my son when he had a friend over and they were smoking weed in the basement when he, was still quite young. That was the only scene I made with him with someone, but never made a scene with the two of them. But I was horrified when I saw that was why they met with me in a public place.
So after about 5 months, the son reaches out to Dawn and says that him and his wife want to discuss some things with her and ask to meet her in a public park together. And she assumed the worst of them for some reason. She really said that she thought that they were going in person so that she couldn't see her granddaughter and that they were going to try to keep the granddaughter from her. But they actually did bring the baby with them. And she got a little upset because later on she found out that they only met her at a park because they were worried about her making a scene or causing like a disturbance, like getting really upset and like screaming at them or something, and they didn't want to deal with that. If you're in your home, in your privacy of your home, someone like that is more willing to do more and be a little bit crazier because no one's watching. But a lot of narcissists don't want to be seen by other people as a bad person or as an abuser, so when they're around others, they will be a lot nicer. They will be a completely different person because people are watching, right? So she got upset saying that she has never made a scene with them and she doesn't understand why that they would want to have her there and that they likely just saw it online. It's something that they saw online and then they just believed it, so they did that, right? But this is another conflicting statement because right after she talks about one time when she made a scene, not with these two, but with another one of the sons. She made a scene one time in their house and, the kids talk, so of course they would know about it. And so that's a conflicting statement. I never made a scene, and then talking about the one time she made a scene. She does this so much. I have at least 3 examples of this. And this is just the first one. We're going to talk about more of those. She really likes these conflicting statements. I don't even know how she doesn't notice that she makes that many of them, but she does.
We set boundaries. They set boundaries. I did set a boundary that I would stop reaching out first. I would let them reach out first. And because I had been so excited to be a grandmother, I was so excited to have another relative, to have a female blood relative. I had no other female blood relatives on the planet other than my granddaughter. Being an orphan is a very traumatizing experience. Adult children will say they orphan themselves. No, you still have those relatives are still on the planet. You are an orphan when there are no other blood relatives on the planet. That's when you are an orphan.
So Dawn mentions briefly that being an orphan was really traumatic for her. And then she goes on to invalidate anybody who goes no contact with their parents, considering themselves an orphan, because they're still alive. You still have blood relatives, and therefore you are not an orphan. But the thing is that she is 100% wrong. According to dictionary.com definition for orphan, you can be an orphan as an adjective, a descriptive word of a person, right? As an adjective, you can use the word orphan to describe someone who is bereft of parents. And bereft means deprived or robbed of. So people who have had to go no contact with their parents, they have usually tried at least once or twice to tell their parents what's wrong and try to work with them and find a way to make a compromise or a change so that the parent treats them better. But when they show absolutely no signs of ever wanting to get better, not wanting to improve themselves at all, not wanting to treat you better, and fight against it with everything that they have, you're going to end up cutting that person off, right? And because you didn't have normal parents, these people you had to cut out of your life, which is not the normal experience for a lot of people who have parents, right? A lot of people want to have a good relationship with their parents, including those who go no contact. But the thing is you can only handle so much. If you've tried multiple times and they still accost you and they don't want to change, you're going to cut them off. And that means that you were robbed of and deprived of having normal parents. You are an orphan. Now, I wouldn't call myself an orphan, even though technically I would qualify because I cut my mom off as soon as I mentally could handle doing so and was low contact for many years before that. And as well as the fact that my dad, I've only met him a couple times. He lives in another state and we barely talk. So I haven't really had any major parental figures in my life once I moved in with my mom. I lived with my grandparents until I was 10, and they were completely normal people. They were nice to me. That's the only reason I even think that I'm a normal, functional person today, is because I had a little bit of a basis of a good, normal childhood. And then I moved in when I was 10 with my mom, and everything went crazy, right? So I raised myself from the age of 10 when I moved in there because my mom didn't cook dinner every day. She she didn't take care of the house properly. She wasn't attentive to my needs. She didn't help with homework. Like, I literally had no support at home. From the age of 10 on, I took care of myself. And then a year later, when I was 11, my brother was born, and I helped raise him. I took care of him sometimes more than my mother even was because of her neglect from the day that he was born until he was 14, when I finally was able to move out for good, the fourth time that I tried. I think both of us could be considered an orphan because we were deprived of having a normal relationship with our parents because of their actions. So I just think it's kind of messed up for her to be like, oh, pity me, I was an orphan. And then just be like, but you guys who also had a crappy situation with your parents, you're not an orphan. Don't use that word. Just because you were cutting them off doesn't mean that you're an orphan. It's just crazy for me that she can really think that, you know.
However, I was undiagnosed with PTSD. My therapist did not see the signs, even though he heard the signs. And, you know, because I would leave the visits with my granddaughter just shook, just waiting for them to stop me from visiting with her. I was worried that everything I said was going to be held against me. I was worried I was going to say the wrong thing. I was worried that I was going to say something that was going to upset them. So I would, you know, panic and think when I left that I was just going to get a message that I'd done something wrong. And I would share this with my therapist, and he still didn't see it. He would try to tell me that things were going well. Then I had some trauma come back into my life after Christmas when my dog started showing signs of a brain tumor, which he did indeed have. And still being unhealed completely from my psychosis and my brain injury, this is not an excuse. This is a reality that I was living that made my emotional liability more difficult. Not having someone that I lived with to help me to, you know, monitor myself as far as my emotions and my emotional liability was concerned. I reached out to my son first in regards to my granddaughter, which was a boundary that I had created, and he didn't take well to that.
Now Dawn discusses that when they met at the park that day, the couple put down some ground rules, some boundaries they wanted Dawn to follow for her to be in their life again. Because, like I was saying before, most kids do not want to cut a parent out of their life. They're willing to give them a chance to do better. And unfortunately for Dawn, that chance, she blew it, right? During that 5 months, she was blowing up the couple nonstop, being crazy about wanting to see her grandchild, and she wasn't even really talking about them all that much. She just really wanted to see the baby and was constantly talking about the baby. So they set the boundary that if you're going to be in our life again, you cannot reach out to us first regarding the baby, because it was too much. They were overwhelmed with the amount of time she was emailing and texting them, right? So she agrees to set the boundary because she wants to see them and the baby again, right? And then she broke that promise. She texted first, after a little while, she texted first about the baby, and obviously her son did not take that very well. That was one of the only stipulations that they asked of her.
Instead of not responding to his harsh response to that about the granddaughter, I responded, and I shouldn't have. I should have walked away. So from that point forward, I did everything I shouldn't have done. And it truly wasn't until I did everything that I shouldn't have done, which was trying to justify, trying to explain, and trying to stop the horror from happening that was happening right before my eyes in real time, that I finally started looking into, you know, adult-child estrangement. And I realized, Jesus, I'm doing everything wrong, but I'd already done it all wrong.
So in response to her reaching out first, trying to talk about the baby, the son, in her opinion, was very harsh towards her about that broken promise. And she said that she responded to his message instead of just leaving it alone, and she regrets it because she says she shouldn't have responded. It made it worse. And she tried to justify and explain herself and why she reached out first and broke this promise she made them, instead of just not breaking the boundaries that they made to continue to see them, right? So obviously the couple did not take that well. They were really upset that one of the only rules they asked of her, and she could not abide by it.
The other thing I did wrong is I involved my middle son in conversations in regards to his brother. And when I told my middle son that I had sent a book to my granddaughter, which was a book about Noodle, and I tried to cancel the order because I realized, damn, I shouldn't have done that. I couldn't cancel the order. So I involved telling my middle son, you know, please let my oldest know that I tried to cancel the order and I couldn't. It led to my middle son being very authoritarian to me about the situation, which I did not take very well. And that led to our estrangement. And then along came, my youngest had been very, very, very low contact after his middle brother moved very close to him. And when I started doing the TikToks, my youngest was not upset about the TikToks. He was upset that I was not taking accountability. And that's when he said he was going no contact. And that's when he said that I was emotionally abusive in their childhood. And he said that if I harassed his father, that he would never speak to me ever again. That is not a boundary for him. That's a threat. That's where I say it's a threat. And harassing his father is me being truthful about the abuse that I received from his dad.
So after they get into the fight about her breaking the boundaries they had made, she is trying to cancel some order for a book that she made for the grandchild, and it apparently won't let her cancel it. It's too late. So instead of just leaving it alone and letting the book show up and that being it, she involves her middle son in this situation. She texts him and says this whole thing about the order. Can you let the oldest son know? I tried to cancel it and it won't let me. So you're still going to get a book from me, but it's already been ordered before we had this fight, right? And I'm sure that middle son does not like being forced by his mom to be a middleman messenger in the situation between his brother and his mother, right? This conversation actually led to the second son going no contact with his mother. And the third son at that time was already very low contact. And so when she started making TikToks, he went completely no contact. And she says it's not because she was making videos, but because of what she was saying in those videos. He said that she wasn't taking accountability for what she did to them. And he is 100% right, because she has not. She says that she's taking accountability, and she says that she's done the work, but she has not, based on a lot of the statements that she's made. We'll go over that a little bit more later, where you'll see that she always talks about having done the work, and she just has not done it. The next video that we're going to talk about is actually the one that irked me the most while researching this, because for some reason, despite all the problems she has in her own life, Dawn decided to make an advice video for women that are going to become mother-in-laws soon, like basically just giving advice on how to interact with your daughter-in-law if you're a mother who is the mother of a son and that son got married to a woman. So basically it's a video giving information about how to build a relationship and how not to build a relationship with your daughter-in-law. Basically, what do you do and what do you not do when you're trying to form a relationship with your daughter-in-law. Now, obviously, she's had a ton of trouble with her daughter-in-law, right? There's been a lot of problems. So why is she making an advice video about this? Beats me, but let's go over the advice that she gave, because it's not very good.
I know I wasn't going to do TikToks for at least a few more days, but I ended up going down a rabbit hole yesterday and wanted to share a few things I learned. I learned how my daughter-in-law views things, and I know that my daughter-in-law is not alone. I do think that daughter-in-laws, you have your view, your child has their view, and your in-laws, anything that you've done wrong, that view is going to be magnified and distorted in the magnification 1,000,000 times over.
Dawn starts out real strong with this one. She talks about the fact that if a daughter-in-law perceives anything you do as even a little bit bad, that she will magnify it times 1,000,000 and then spread it by talking about it to your child until that child hates you and goes no contact. That is not a normal experience. I don't know why she is acting like that is always the case, or like most likely to be the case, because there are tons of people that have good relationships with their mother-in-laws, and the fact that she's trying to give advice on this, like, that's just the first thing that she said. There's still a lot more, and oh God, I hope nobody thought that this was good advice and used it, because she might actually hurt the relationship for strangers between them and their new daughter-in-laws, just because they followed her advice. Her advice is not good. So by saying that, she's actually blaming the daughter-in-law for all of the actions that she took. Dawn said something that was actually offensive to her, but she won't admit that it's offensive, because she's saying that if it's perceived as bad, even if it's not, if it's perceived as bad by the daughter-in-law, then she's going to spin it, make it worse, and then convince your son not to talk to you anymore. She just can't look past her own experience to talk about anything. She can't even be general about it, because that's her experience, so she thinks that everyone is like that, and that's just wild.
I'm not going to give exact details, but it just blew my mind. And then we'll just pack my daughter-in-law away. The first is, no matter how much you try to protect your daughter-in-law, whether you're not doing TikToks or you are, it will somehow will get out to her that you're not trying to protect her. I've never once posted a picture of my daughter-in-law in any of my content, and any of my followers know that. Not once. Any pictures of my sons, I have covered up their faces. But I've been so careful to not post pictures of my daughter-in-law. Yet somehow, someone decided to send pictures that were supposedly for my content about estrangement. Those internet sleuths, awfully sweet.
She also talks about never having posted a photo of the daughter-in-law, and that if she posts pictures of her own sons, that she blocks out their face. Now, I haven't seen proof on this, but there are people in the community of people that follow Dawn's content and keep an eye on her to see the crazy things that she's saying. There is people talking about the fact that she may have actually posted a picture of her daughter-in-law and then deleted it. I don't know for sure. That's just something I saw in the comments while researching. Take that with a grain of salt. But even if she says that she has not posted a picture of her daughter-in-law, so what? That doesn't mean you're a good person. It also doesn't mean that you didn't abuse them. Just because you didn't post her online doesn't mean that you're not spilling some of her secrets online. She's talked about some pretty personal things. There's actually something specifically in one of the no contact videos that I cut out because I don't know if that's something this person wants out there. And so I decided to just cut it out and not talk about it because I actually respect the privacy of these people more than Dawn does. It's a bit ironic that she was talking about protecting the privacy of her sons because a situation happened really recently that is the reason I even started looking into this story today, is because she recently posted a text exchange between her and her son, her oldest son, where it showed that she was texting him all the time, but he was not responding at all. And when she edited that photo to remove the contact name, the marker that she used on it was kind of see-through, and so while it's mostly blocked out, you can still, if you squint, you can still read his full name. So without realizing it, she doxed her son's first and last name online. She tried to delete it. Obviously, the internet's forever, and someone saved a screenshot. I have that screenshot. I am not going to show that screenshot because I care more about the privacy of her son and her daughter-in-law than she does. And so I'll show you the image, but I fully edited out his name so that you cannot see it.
Your memories as a mother will not match your daughter-in-law's memories if you have a son. They will not match. I was astounded.
So Dawn continues her list to the mother-in-laws, right? And she's telling the other boy moms that their daughter-in-laws will always take things the wrong way. She says the daughter-in-law's memories and her memories will never match because the daughter-in-law will always perceive things negatively. In reality, it's because the daughter-in-law remembers what actually happened, and then Dawn remembers only what she chooses to remember. And then she talks about right after that she broke the no contact promise again the night before making this video we're watching right now. First saying she sent one email, but then directly afterwards saying she sent a PS email. So she actually sent 2 emails. So it's another one of those multiple doublespeak things that she's been doing this whole time.
I broke the no contact barrier last night. I was that astounded. I took screenshots and I sent them emails. An email and a PS email with receipts, contradicting what she was saying.
So despite all of the videos where she says that she's learned her lesson, that she's learned something from the mistakes that she made, and that she, is hoping to teach others so that they don't make the mistakes she did, she is still making those mistakes today, to this day, on the day where she's making these videos. She is not healed. She is not moved on from it. She has not done the radical acceptance that she claims to do. She is still in the very thick of not accepting that her kids had a good reason to disown her, right? she still wants to blame it all on everyone else and act like it's not her own fault. It's so crazy to watch someone double speak that much and not realize that they literally don't make any sense.
A daughter-in-law will only remember the negative. Will only remember the negative. Anything you've done that's positive will not be remembered at all. Remember that. When I did the Thanksgiving video and she took accountability for canceling that, I didn't go into the absolute minute detail of everything from that Thanksgiving day because I was taking accountability for the huge thing that I did wrong, which was I canceled and I didn't go. I went to my friend's yoga that morning and I stayed home. She was upset that I didn't give more detail. I've been trying very hard to just take accountability for what I did wrong. She says I got angry that they didn't stop by after. Very angry. Honestly, I've never known myself to get very angry. I've gotten upset. Being upset or emotional versus angry are two different things. But again, the perception and the memory are two different things. It was interesting because she doesn't even remember the no contact correctly. And I give her grace on that because the baby was very young, very young. But I sent receipts with a date as to when he said we're taking a break. And I didn't see them, talk to them, or see my granddaughter for 5 more months. That's no contact. 5 months is a long break. And she described it in a totally different way.
The next thing on her list is that daughter-in-laws will only remember the negative things that you do, and anything positive you do will be forgotten. But if there is so much negative that the positive could never possibly compare to the amount of negative interactions you've had with that person, why would you even try? The daughter-in-law claimed online to being stalked by Dawn, and I actually found that she did admit to that in one of her own videos, that she drove around and followed her in her car, and she has cameras on her car, so she caught Dawn following her around just trying to catch a glimpse of the baby. That is stalking. Do you not know that, Dawn? That's stalking. You can't do that. And she's still going to sit there and try to say that the daughter-in-law is only going to remember negative and that she will always magnify things times a million. That is really bad, Dawn. Do you not realize how bad that is, that you stalked her? She's not exaggerating. She's trying to make it seem like daughter-in-laws are going to exaggerate any tiny little thing you do to turn your sons against you. She stalked her. That is not a minuscule little tiny negative thing that she did. That is serious mental health issues. And the fact that she doesn't realize how bad of a thing that was to do, like how that would turn into them never ever wanting to talk to you again, because maybe before all that there was still a sliver of a chance. You stalking her, that will for sure end your chance of ever having either of them or your grandchild in your life ever again. That was such a wild thing for her to do. I cannot believe she still thinks that was okay.
So new mother-in-laws, do not attempt to joke with your daughter-in-law. They're going to be very sensitive. And I get in trouble for saying sensitive. Don't, especially if you're a mother of boys, don't try to joke with your daughter-in-law. It's just, you don't know where their sensitivities lie. You don't know, even if they joke about a topic, you cannot joke about that same topic. Don't do it. Just don't even go there. And don't attempt to be close with your daughter-in-law. Don't attempt. Let your daughter-in-law do all of the initiation of contact. If you need to reach out to their household, reach out through your son. Don't reach out through your daughter-in-law. It gives them the ick. It gives them the cringe. I know I try to do it to try to include her as a part of the family, but don't do it. It's almost like we're trying too hard. Just let them be.
So next on Dawn's list here is that you cannot joke with your daughter-in-laws because they are very sensitive and they will take it the wrong way. Her idea of a joke, though, was to bring up that the newborn baby didn't look like the mom and only looked like the dad. And she admitted to knowing beforehand that that is something that the daughter-in-law would be sensitive about. So no one would ever take that as a joke. It's not funny. She goes as far as to say that you shouldn't even try to be close with your daughter-in-law because they will turn your son against you. She said, you cannot be friendly with your daughter-in-law. Don't try to have a close relationship with them. It will only ever end badly. You cannot do it. Again, she is basing everything on this list on her own experience alone and nothing else. It's only based on her experience with her daughter-in-law, when all of that happened was her own fault. It was all Dawn's fault. All of it. It's just so wild. It's just so wild. I don't even know what to say about some of this stuff anymore. It's just crazy. Reach out regarding the household to the daughter-in-law. You should only reach out to your son. And isn't that what actually led to the whole no contact situation with her oldest son? She kept apologizing to the son when she was hurting the daughter-in-law's feelings. It was completely disrespectful to not reach out to her. Like, she's not a person. Like she's supposed to just give the message to the son and the son will relay it. That's just not how it works these days. It's a very outdated way to think that if it's regarding the household, you reach out to the man of the house. Most women would not be okay with that these days. So the fact that she's trying to tell other people to do that is horrendous. If anybody else does that, they're going to suffer negative consequences, because most women these days would definitely take offense to that, including me. She says the reasoning for this being on the list is because if you reach out to your daughter-in-law, they're going to get the ick and they're going to find it cringy. And then they're going to be weird towards you and they're not going to like you. And then eventually it's going to snowball to them telling their son to go no contact with you. She says that she was just trying to include the daughter-in-law in the family, but she tells everyone else not to do it because in her experience it did not work out. I don't think that saying what she said to her really felt like feeling included, right? She has a really twisted way of thinking where she thinks that these really nasty, negative things, passive-aggressive things that she's doing are somehow positive and that they're just received negatively and that the daughter-in-law's sensitive when she is not. That is completely out of pocket, and I just can't believe that she thinks that this is how normal people interact with their daughter-in-laws. And that's like a completely normal situation when a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law are interacting. It's just not. She has no idea what she's talking about.
Hard part was accusations that were simply untrue. There was one situation that happened when we were doing porch visits that, had to look through the glass because this was COVID time, look through the glass at the baby. And I was trying to get her to look towards me. And I was like, are you going to come see Glammy? You going to come spend the night with Glammy? And we had been talking about my second bedroom and whether or not I could fit a twin bed in the second bedroom with everything else that needed to fit in there because I was downsizing greatly. And they were upset with me, I found out later, for suggesting that a 3-week-old baby go spend the night with her grandmother, which I was not at all suggesting that she come spend the night then, but that was not how they took it. But how it's remembered is I was knocking on the window saying, Glammy, 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 Glammy. If that's what I was doing, I should have still been hospitalized. That's not what I was doing. I was knocking on the window trying to get her to turn her head towards me, towards the sound, and to make baby talk. I was saying, gonna come spend the night with Glammy? Are you gonna come spend the night with Glammy? And that got me into trouble.
So she brings up the porch visit again here, but she gives a little more details this time as well. It seems like each time she tells it, she'll give a few more details that we didn't get last time. Sometimes even the details contradict each other, but, she's told the story a few times at this point. But in this one, she mentions the porch video and talks about that she had to see the baby through glass because it's COVID times, right? And so she was tapping on the glass and saying things to the baby about coming to stay the night with grandma and then discussing out loud while talking and cooing at the baby through the window with the parents right there on the porch with her, talking about whether or not she could fit another bed into her apartment because she has a small apartment. She said she was downsizing or something. Talking about if she can fit another bed so that the baby would have a place to sleep when the baby comes to stay in the house with the grandma. This is a 3-week-old baby, in case you didn't know. Okay? She won't be away from mom for the night for a very long time. Usually at least 2 or 3 years into being alive, right? Oh my God. I can't believe she was talking about that, about a 3-week-old baby. That 3-week-old baby ain't going nowhere. Secondly, it's COVID times. That baby cannot be around anyone but the parents anyway. That's why you're behind the glass, And I don't blame them for being freaked out by the way she was speaking about that baby. It is a bit of a weird response to meet a newborn baby through the glass and then immediately start talking about them coming with you when she had just gotten there. Like, she had just started being there talking about taking the baby, right? That's freaking weird. And most people would be concerned, especially for their first child, right? It's their first child. And this lady's talking about taking the baby. Like, what? I don't blame them. They probably thought that, she might kidnap that baby and try to raise it as her own. That is giving those vibes. It's creepy. She tries to say that the daughter-in-law's memories of what happened, and she describes them, are very different from the way that Dawn actually describes what happened. But when she was trying to explain how they're completely different and that the daughter-in-laws will remember things differently, when she describes it, it sounds exactly the same to me. That she was overbearing, tapping on the glass, saying some weird stuff, which she admitted to saying, and then that they were, like, concerned after that, and also the mom was already upset because she had never apologized for being so mean to her in the past, right? So it was just, like, a ton of factors at once, but she was acting so weird to the baby that they were freaked out. And then she said what she said to her about, aren't you pissed off that the baby doesn't look like you? And it was just all of those things combined together. Bad vibes. They don't want mom in the picture anymore. And I 100% do not blame them. I would have done the same thing in their situation.
Memories change. And again, it was well over a year of straight estrangement. And it had been a straight 5 months of estrangement before that, before I started doing TikToks. But my daughter-in-law now says that they've been estranged for 2 years, and it's been 2 years of me doing a smear campaign. I just hit the 1 year mark on doing TikTok, and I did nothing. I said nothing on social media about this until I started doing the TikToks. And I've tried not to smear. I truly have tried not to smear. And I'm trying not to smear now. I'm trying to help mothers with married children understand, especially with daughter-in-laws, gotta be careful.
Did you catch that? She made another conflicting statement. She says, I try not to smear. And then right after says, I'm trying to smear now. She does that so much. She says, I'm not like that. But actually, I'm doing that right now. Like, what? That makes no sense. Her own sense of self is even confused because who she thinks she is conflicts with who she actually is. My mom also had a lot of trouble with this. She would claim to anyone who would listen that she is not a liar, she's not a thief, she's not a cheat, that she's a good person despite what she had been through, and all of that was just a lie. It was a lie she told herself, it was a lie she told everyone else, and I think she really believed her lies. That she had, because she had done all of those things. She had done a bunch of those things to me. She had lied to me constantly. She had stolen from me all the time, both like in front of my face and behind my back. And she cheated on my stepdad like a ton of times. So she did all of those things, even though she was constantly claiming to anyone who would listen to her for more than a minute that she was not a liar, a thief, or a cheat. She said that all the time. But because these people have a certain idea of who they are as a person that differs from their actual personality traits, you cannot convince them that they are doing anything wrong because it's hard-coded into how they think about themselves that they are good and that anyone that says otherwise is bad.
Know that the way you remember things, if you are estranged, your daughter-in-law remembers them 1,000,000 times worse. Honestly, 1,000,000 times worse if she's anything like my daughter-in-law. I had to reach out, but I won't reach out again.
And Dawn finishes off the video by saying that she had reached out to them regarding the fact that the daughter-in-law is lying about her online because she had posted some things on Reddit, and that she was not going to reach out to her again after that email, or the 2 emails actually that she sent. But she had said before that she wasn't going to reach out to them ever again, and then she did. So her kids have every right to continue the no contact. When nothing has changed whatsoever, she can't even keep her word about not reaching out to them. Okay, so we finished the main chunk of the most important videos I wanted to show you, like the no contact stuff and her weird little list for mother-in-laws. Everything after this is just going to be tidbits from different posts on TikTok that she's made. I'm probably not going to show all of the videos. I'm going to show just parts of them because some of the stuff, she just rambles and she repeats herself a lot. I just didn't really want to show all of these videos. I'm just going to show some snippets that kind of prove that she's just not a reliable narrator when it comes to her own story, and that she is lying or at least underselling what actually happened and the actions that she took that harmed her children.
No, I was made aware of a lot of things earlier in the week. And one of them was to the extent of my daughter-in-law's discontent. And I won't go into it. But the one part that I will mention was her therapist's comment. Her therapist commented that she would have a bullseye on her back for taking away my grandmother experience. And she did. What are therapists doing these days? They're egging on no contact and estrangement and not reconciliation. I mean, to say to someone such as my daughter-in-law, and I'm not going to say anything else about my daughter-in-law, that there would be a bullseye on her back. Would I ever have a chance of reconciling? No.
In this video that Dawn made about flying monkeys, I'm not going to go into what she said about that because it was a bit segmented and a little confusing to follow. I am going to talk about a little tidbit in the middle of the video that she mentioned. So Dawn found out that the daughter-in-law was posting on Reddit talking about the situation quite openly. She wasn't saying Dawn's name, but she was definitely posting in a subreddit that is known to be about Dawn and other people like Dawn. So she knew it was about her and she knew it was the daughter-in-law, right? So she's talking about the fact that the daughter-in-law was talking about how her therapist told her she was going to have a target on her back for depriving Dawn of the grandmother experience. And Dawn goes on a little bit of a rant about what are therapists doing these days? And she slams them for supporting no contact instead of supporting reconciliation with those parents. Dawn just can't seem to realize that people have limits of what they can and can't handle, and that she has so far exceeded the limits of her son's ability to deal with those things that she is doing that they felt that they had no choice other than to exit her life permanently. Therapists will support whatever is healthiest for their clients. So if reconciliation is possible, of course they're going to support it and they're going to help them work on how to go about it the right way and make sure that it's not too intense or too stressful. And when it isn't going to work out, when they've already tried to do that with their parents, tried to talk it out, tried to make their parents realize that they are being nasty and that they need to go to therapy or to change and not be so nasty to their kids. After so long, you can only leave. There's nothing you can do. If they're not going to change, all you can do is remove yourself from the situation. So if that's what's healthiest for them, the therapist is definitely going to tell them that that's what they should do, right? And therapists can't tell anybody to do anything. All they can do is suggest it. So it's not like they're brainwashing their patients into making these bad decisions or something, because I really think that Dawn thinks that that's something they're doing. She also admitted in this video that she won't leave TikTok, even though it would benefit her son and her daughter-in-law greatly to not have to worry about these videos being posted all the time about them. She thinks that she's an advocate for the parents of adult children who go no contact. She thinks she's doing some type of good here, so that's why she won't stop. But many of the advice videos she's made would lead to more trouble if you actually followed them. She cannot even follow her own advice that she gives to other people, so I really hope nobody thinks of following her advice when she can't even follow it herself.
I was raised by the most vocal silent generation female that you could imagine. She was the one who wore the pants in the family. What she said went, and many times what she said was, I was being too sensitive. I lost my high school sweetheart in a car accident. I was allowed to grieve until after the funeral. Once the funeral was done, I was expected to get over it. If you knew how many times I was told growing up that I was being too sensitive, you might understand a little bit more about why it was that I had a hard time relating to a daughter-in-law. And it wasn't that I didn't try. All boy moms are at a disadvantage when they have a daughter-in-law. The daughter-in-law was raised by someone who understands where her triggers are, where her sensitivities are. I have a friend who has 4 daughters, and I remember her telling me different things about different daughters and which ones were the most sensitive. She even named one after me. So I'm not the horrible person that people like to perceive that I am in the comments.
In this next video, Dawn talked a little bit about how she grew up and talking about how her mother was the head of household. She wore the pants in their family, and that she was often told she was being too sensitive. That when her high school sweetheart died, her mother expected her to stop grieving once they buried him and had the funeral. She says that this is the reason why she can't relate to the daughter-in-law, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. If you were really sensitive growing up, then shouldn't you know that women are sensitive? She told her adult son that she doesn't understand the sensitivities of women when she was at one time, according to herself, a sensitive woman. Wouldn't you know that women are sensitive if you were a sensitive woman at one point? She's not now, obviously. She's not sensitive, not in the way that she was describing. Her daughter-in-law is sensitive, but this whole thing just makes absolutely no sense. She claims that because a friend named one of her daughters Dawn, that means that she is not a bad person, because who would name their kid after a bad person? You know, there's probably kids named Hitler, right? Or Adolf, like, named after him. Like, that is something people will still do. You cannot say that just because someone named their child after you, that you are a good person. That makes, those things have nothing to do with each other. The fact that she even said that is so funny. I've referenced her thoughts on doing the work and learning from her mistakes and all that previously, and I was talking about the fact that it's not true, that she hasn't done the work and that she does not know what she did wrong. Like, she doesn't really fully accept that she is the reason why that happened. And this is a video that I had already seen that I was mentioning. So she's saying in the video that she did the work in therapy, but if she's still posting these types of videos, including the ones that I have shown previously to this one, that's absolutely not true.
That PTSD therapy was very intensive and it was very helpful. I'm not a big crier at all, and I would be doing the work at home that I had to do before each session, and I'd have tears just streaming down my face as I was doing the work. And so it helped release a lot of the trauma that I had been through throughout my life. I wish I had gone through it before. I really do.
She mentions doing work before therapy. I don't really know what she means by that, but she mentioned that she was doing this work before therapy and then crying, and then admits that she forgave herself. And so why haven't her children forgiven herself if she has, right? Like, she's over the fact that she was a bad person at one time and that her injury made her bad. Why can't they just get over it? And it's because it wasn't just because of the injury. There was so many other things before that. It was just the tip of the iceberg.
My therapist also, when I would come into a session and was really down on myself about being a horrible parent, he would put me in my place about the fact that I was not a horrible parent, and he would remind me of ways that I had not been a horrible parent. This was a professional who had seen horrible parenting firsthand. He reminded me of many ways I was not a horrible parent.
She talks about the validation her therapist gave to her and told her that she's not a horrible parent. And this is something that I mentioned before, that with the daughter-in-law at first said that she was a good mom, and Dawn holds on to that as validation because she doesn't really get that validation from anyone else outside of herself. She's the only one that really validates that. So anytime anybody has said anything like that, she's going to hold on to that. She's going to remember that. Even when she can't remember all the bad things she said to people, she will remember when someone said 20 years ago that she was a good mom, right? So it's so crazy, her selective memory, I think that she clings to these different instances of people validating her, but they're not people that are close to her. They're strangers and acquaintances. She had just met her daughter-in-law recently when she said that nice thing about her, and the therapist only has her side of the story, where she spins and leaves out details, right? So, of course, the therapist is going to say she's a good mom because she's not abusing her children physically, right? She's not seeing any, major signs of abuse, so of course she's going to say that. You're not going to be like, yeah, you're a horrible parent. That's not what therapists are for, right? It's just crazy that she really has to cling to those little things from strangers and acquaintances because the people around her that actually got to know her, the real her, wanted nothing to do with her. That's really sad. She also mentions in this video, as well as one other I'm not going to be showing in this video today, that she, on more than one occasion, had attempted to end her life. And I don't know if that's actually true. It's hard to know, it's hard to believe everything that Dawn says because of how much she's, constantly lying and double speaking. But honestly, anytime from a person who acts the way that Dawn does, anytime that I've heard them say that they were going to end their life. It's not true. Like, it's a mental manipulation. They're going to say it. They're going to say it over and over. They're never going to do it. They are so self-important, they would never end their life because they think they're the only person in existence. They don't want to end their life. But they're going to say that they are, or say that they're sad enough to do that, and they're going to try to convince you that they would do that because then you feel bad for them. And if you feel bad for them, you can't be mad at them about the things that they're doing anymore because you're now you're concerned. This is something I'm unfortunately really familiar with because my mom did it all the time. It was a very long time before I realized that she didn't mean it and would never do it. It was just to make me feel bad so that I would go from angry at the abuse that she was causing for me and my family to feeling like I needed to comfort her and be a parent to her instead of having a parent myself. It's classic DARVO. She would deflect. She would say, I didn't do that. And then those qualifying statements, even if I did it, I would have had a good reason. And then if that didn't work, she would move on to the attack, right? She would start going at me about something I did, even if it was little or I didn't even do anything at all. If there was nothing that I did for her to pick on when I was trying to address something that she was doing, she would make something up. She would literally just pick the smallest thing, or she would just straight up lie and say that I did something. So, she did the deflect, she did the attack, and then she reversed victim and offender. She would threaten to kill herself. Oh, I guess I'm just the worst mom in the world. Wouldn't it be better if I was just gone? Wouldn't all of you just have a better life if I just killed myself? That kind of talk. And then you feel like you have to help them because, that's basically how she trained me. She trained me to be the person who would forget the problems and just go to her aid and be there for her because of the emotional enmeshment that she put on me. She put a lot of pressure on me to be there for her emotionally, like even more than her own husband. That's something that these people are very good at. It's mental manipulation. They want to make you feel bad for them so that they become the victim and then you become the person who's going to help them.
He also had been helping me for a number of years prior to my children going no contact, trying to build that relationship with my sons. And he was very honest with me that he felt very strongly that the alienation that their father had put into place their entire lives was a big reason for the split between my boys and myself. This was a professional who had observed and listened to my very truthful stories. I can't lie. It's something I can't do. Everyone that has heard my stories may have heard an extra tidbit that I've not shared before, but everything else has been the same. It's just me. It's just me sharing my truths. And, he, as a professional, listening to what he's listened to, truly feels that what has happened started a long time ago. I have my faults, absolutely, as a mom, and I take accountability for that. But I had the deck stacked against me when I discarded the narc, when I divorced him.
So while talking about the fact that she went to therapy and talked to her therapist about the fact that her husband's a narcissist and about the parental alienation, she makes a statement that actually made me stop in my tracks when I was writing the script for this. Here, I'm going to read you a quote. Even though I just showed it, I'm going to read the quote again because I think it's important. She says, "He listened to my truthful stories. Very truthful. I can't lie. It's something I can't do. It's just me sharing my truths." And in case you don't know, especially when you're reading that is just how Trump talks. That is exactly how Trump talks during his speeches. Here is a real quote from Donald Trump a few days before his inauguration. He said, "I don't like to lie. No. I don't like to lie. No. It's not something that I would like to be doing." And that sounds just a little bit too familiar to what Dawn just said there. People who are telling the truth, they don't have to do an aside to assure people that they are telling the truth. They just tell the truth and then move on. You know what I mean? That's something my mom did a lot, and we've discussed this already, that Dawn did it too. That she would, she will make a statement and then qualify it a ton to make sure people believe her. But when you do that to people that know better, it's very obvious that you are absolutely lying when you say that, because if you were not lying, you would know it's true and you don't need to convince anyone. You would just say it and move on. This is also something my mom did a lot. She would tell anyone who would listen that she is just brutally honest. She can't lie. She hates liars. And she just always talked about the fact that people don't like her because she's brutally honest, and most people can't handle that kind of honesty. But she's not just brutally honest. She's a fucking bitch. She is such a mean person. She is such a nasty person. So that's why people don't like her. Not because she's being honest, but because she is a nasty person and says disgusting things to people. And she lied through her teeth constantly. So while she's saying she's brutally honest, she can't lie, she hates liars, she lied to anyone she could about a lot of different things. And anyone who makes those qualifying statements, it's always going to stick out to me that they're not telling the truth, because you don't need to qualify a statement like that when you are.
I have not reached out to the father of my children since May of 23, when he cut contact, except for one day, and that was October 11th of this last year. I sent him a text, let him know that one of our son's dogs was going to be put down that day, and said, if you find it appropriate, would you please share the news with him? And I sent him 2 recent pictures of Rock Dog so that my son could have those pictures of his old pug.
So this is the last video that I'm going to talk about today, which, thank God, because I am so over talking about this woman, but I felt it was really important. She makes a statement in this video about parental alienation, where she is talking about the fact that she didn't reach out to her kid's father. And then right after, she admits that she did reach out to him a month prior, so another doublespeak. And she had reached out to him because she was putting down a dog that the children had had in part of their childhood. So she had to put the dog down. She asked the father to send the message along from her to the kids, so that, you know, if they wanted to come see the dog or just wanted to know that it was happening, that they would know, right? In my opinion, I don't think that this was actually about the dog. She was just trying to use this as an excuse to be able to reach out to her kids without being penalized for, like, breaking the no contact again. So even though it was through the father, she used the fact the dog was going to be dying soon to be able to try to talk to them, hoping that maybe for some reason they would want to talk to her about this, or to come to her house to see the dog before it passes away. That's what I'm guessing was her goal of this. And the reason that I believe that could be the case is because something similar to that happened to me. I paid most of the way in high school for me to adopt a dog, and the rest of the money was paid by my stepdad. But even though my mom did not pay any money to get this dog, she claimed him as hers. Even though I was his person, he slept in my bed every day. He was actually terrified of my mom because she was screaming all the time, and he was scared of that. This little Chihuahua Dachshund, little guy named Nicky. He was pretty thin when I lived there, but when I moved away, I was the only person that actually, like, stopped the other people in the house from feeding him human food as often, because I knew it wasn't good for him. Once I moved out and my mom would not let me take him just because she knew I wanted him. My mom didn't want him. She had joked even about me taking him with me when I moved out a few months prior, but because I wanted him, it was a control thing. She wouldn't let me have him, right? So they feed him all this human food. He gets really fat. He can barely walk, right? And then on top of that, they stopped putting the lead on him to let him go outside to go to the bathroom. Instead of putting him on so that he only has a certain area he can go, they just let him out. So he was going out, and he could go into the road if he wanted to. So that was a terrible combination, unfortunately. He got hit and ran by a car in the street, and he was left to die. And unfortunately for all of us, my mom used his death as a way to coax me back into her life. She pretended that she was wanting to do better and apologize for the things that she had done, that she wanted to change. She still said she wasn't going to go to therapy, which was one of my only stipulations, but she seemed to really mean it. And this was the first time after going low contact, she actually seemed to want to make a change and wanted me back in her life again. So I was willing to give her a shot. So we were very low contact when this happened, and out of the blue, she texts me to tell me that he's passed on. And I feel very bad. I'm crying, right? But the thing is at that time, and I'm still so frustrated sometimes about my own reaction to things in these situations, but in that moment, I cared more about how she was feeling than me, because I could tell that while I was upset, she was way more upset. She was angry. She was fucking pissed that this person was able to get away with hitting and running our Nikki, and that the cops didn't seem to care at all. They didn't even want to go look for the car or anything, even though she knew what kind of make and model and what color it was. She was a blubbering mess for months. She was constantly crying, and just using that to get sympathy from me, using that as a reason for me not to cut her off. Like, she really, really milked the dog's death to get me to soften towards her again. And it worked because she had trained me from the age of 10 onward to be her emotional blanket, you know, like anytime she needed anything, anytime she needed comfort or validation, she came to me and she expected me to give that to her. And so in this moment when we're very low contact, she uses a horrible situation to make me feel bad and to get me to a point where mentally I'm willing to accept that maybe she has changed and she actually needs me right now. And so I actually started talking to her a little more. We kind of had like a little bit of a normal relationship in between the crazy bouts of crying and me having to comfort her, but it didn't last for long. I don't want to sound insensitive when I say what I'm about to say, so I'm going to say that I understand our dog getting killed in that way was probably very traumatic. It was very traumatic to all of us, even though I wasn't there. My brother took it really hard. He was still mid-teens, so all of us just were very upset, and I understand that it was a very sudden and traumatic situation. But my mom took it way too far, and the only reason I feel I can say that confidently is because I've also seen the way that she does that when people in our lives die as well. In my opinion, I don't think my mother was really as upset about the dog as she made it out to be. I still think that she was quite upset about it and angry and missed him a lot and just grieving. But I think that she played it up a lot. I think that she made it even worse than what she was really feeling inside. She put on a really good show on the outside to make us feel even more bad for her. Because it's one thing if you're crying and you're upset, you might get a hug, but you're not going to get that repeated people coming back, checking on you all day, like, hey, are you okay? Hey, are you okay? That's not going to happen if you're just crying, right? She's got to be a screaming, crying, blubbering mess for months straight. And I understand. Our dog was our best friend. I miss the dog still to this day. But the amount of things that she tried to get away with using the fact that she was grieving our dog was way too many. And she did this when my grandparents died as well. For each of them, they died 10 years apart. For both of these instances of these people passing away, her reaction to the grief was so intense and lasted for so long. But she never tried to address the pain or anything on her own. She expected me to do that. She expected me to help her get to a place where she was stable. And she was just very, very selfish about all of it. She refused therapy because she was paranoid that if she ever took one therapy session that they were going to lock her up in a straitjacket and never let her out. She's super paranoid about that for some reason. And so it made me feel guilty and selfish if I didn't want to continue to be there for her emotionally. That's how she convinced me that was the case, that I was selfish if I didn't help her. And she expected me to help her far more than a daughter should ever have to emotionally. You know what I mean? But every single death that we ever went through, both my grandparents, my grandpa about 10 years ago when I was in high school, and then just a couple years ago, right before I cut her off, my grandma passed away about 10 years after him. And for both of those, I understand. Those were her parents. She was raised by them. They're actually technically her grandparents, but she was adopted by them. And so she was very affected, and I understand. I was raised by them till I was 10. I called them mom and dad my whole life. Those are my parents. That's the only, actual set of people who acted like real parents and, parental figures actually I ever had. So of course, I was upset too, but again, she put on this big show. She wanted people to constantly be feeling bad for her and checking on her, and she just used it to try to get away with a lot of things. She also made statements to me and about my family members, basically referencing to the fact that she's the most upset by them dying, that her feelings on the matter more than everybody else's, that no one else could possibly be hurting as much as she is about what happened, and that she is grieving the hardest, and that she deserves the most sympathy for it. It was really hard to be trying to grieve the people that I cared about while also having to deal with this adult baby who would never do anything to help herself, but expected everyone else to drop everything they're doing and help her. It was just literally insane. The things that I went through, especially regarding grief in that way. I could barely grieve myself because I had to focus on what was going on with my mom. And it was a horrendous nightmare to deal with. Just like a mental minefield, if you will. She felt that she was the only person who could be as affected by it as she was. If anyone even remotely got to a point where they were as upset as she was, she would be like, oh, stop it. You know, it's not that bad. You're overreacting. You know, she was the only one, in her opinion, that was allowed to be that upset by it. Everyone else needed to just be there for her. Like, I swear to God, she was so self-centered when it came to our family members dying that I think she forgot that we were also grieving that same family member. Like, I think truly she thought she was the only one that was that affected by it, and anyone else showing anything she thought was fake, which is ironic because I feel, again, that her reaction being as big as it was fake. It's just so sad to know that these narcissistic people, whether they're diagnosed or not, they are not above using a horrible instance that's happened in your life, such as a death, to gain the upper hand on the children by acting like they need their help. Or by acting like they're trying to reach out to them to be respectful, like Dawn was doing. To be like, oh, I want you to have a chance to at least, like, say goodbye to your dog if you want to, you know. But I really do feel that in her situation, it was more about trying to contact them than it was about the dog. And you can't be held accountable, in these people's minds, you can't be held accountable for all the things that you were doing because you weren't well, right? It's a manipulation tactic that Dawn seems very, very familiar with.
You know, I didn't start doing TikToks until I'd been estranged for close to 2 years. And until I reached out to him, begging him to speak up for me in my defense if I'm brought up in conversation. Not to bring me up, but if I am brought up. And he refused. And I knew that without someone speaking up for me, it was never going to end, especially with the way that he talks about me.
Then, at the end of this video, she starts talking about the fact that she asked her ex-husband that if she ever gets brought up in a conversation or anything, that she asks that he defend her in front of their sons. And he said no. And she was upset by the fact that he said no. Because she says that him saying no to that means that that's proof that he was alienating the 3 kids from her. And that it's still happening to this day as they're adults. They divorced when all of these kids were very young. They have not been together in over 20 years, according to her, right? So he has no obligation to blindly defend her in conversation if she gets brought up. Why would he? Especially after the way that she talks to and about him and blames him online for everything. This conversation took place recently, or after she had already been making videos. So again, why would he want to do that when how she's been talking about him online? And the way that she's treated all of their children. Of course he's not going to defend you. And you definitely have a main character syndrome if like your daughter-in-law suggested in some of her comments, if you think that he was supposed to do that for you. That is something a husband does. That is not something an ex-husband of 23 years does. That was straight up delusional for her to think that he has to defend her if her name is brought up. Why? Why would you think that? I'm not really sure how to even wrap up this video, to be honest with you. I went over a lot of different things. I was mostly just trying to show how often this woman says things that contradict each other. So most likely, a lot of the things she's saying, she is either lying or she is, spinning the truth to make it seem more like she could be a victim and making herself the victim in every situation, even while also simultaneously sometimes admitting that she is the problem. It's just very confusing, and I wanted to explain some of the stuff that she's been talking about because I think that it's crazy for her to be making these types of videos. The fact that she thinks she's an advocate is insane. She talks like she thinks she's a therapist that can help other people in her situation and tell them what not to do. But in the video where she's talking about how the mother-in-laws should treat their daughter-in-laws, she tells them all of the things that they need to do, and those are all things that she did that ended up with her having problems. So I really think that she needs to get off the internet. I don't know if she's just doing this stuff because she has nothing better to do, because she has no one in her life. Is it because she's still in recovery from medical things and she can't do much else? Like, if this is all you have to do is to talk crap about your kids online like that, when you are the reason why all of this happened, you gotta find a hobby. When your therapist told you to find a hobby, they did not mean something like this. This is so toxic, it is so negative, and you are lying by omission when you make these videos. I really think you should take the time to get off the internet and really truly think about what you have done and how it has affected your children. Because even though you say you have done the work and you've done the therapy and that you've gotten better and you know what you did wrong, everything else that you say, aside from those sentences I just said, proves that you actually don't. So, but anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. We made it through this one intact. We're still here, right? And I just want to say thanks so much for all of your support. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel. I am trying to post 1 to 2 videos a month and all interesting internet topics. So if that's what you like, I will be around with more. And thank you so much for anyone who watched this whole thing. I'm sure it's pretty long. All right, guys, have a great day and I'll see you next time. Bye.